Hello. Thank you for joining for quotes 753 through 756 from the book The 7 Steps to Awakening. These quotes are by Sri Visistha, the Supreme Yoga. And before reading the quotes, I'd like to share a talk by A.Ramana regarding difference between meditation and self-inquiry. He says the difference between meditation and self-inquiry is really basic. Meditation is a subject which is I, me, self, meditating on something else, on an object, a thought, a notion, even a color. That can be helpful, but it's not as direct. For example, when you are meditating on a color, ask yourself in the process of meditating on the color, who is seeing this color? Now, the fact is that you could not see or think or even know the color unless there was an I that is doing the thinking, doing the seeing. Now, back behind that I that is doing the seeing, doing the thinking, is the awareness that you are. That ultimately you want to transcend and abide in the awareness. When you are thinking of or seeing a color as your method of meditation, that is the mind itself. The I as the mind, as the thinker, and the color is the object on which you are meditating. Again, that's helpful in order to bring you into a way of being at peace and not have to think about whatever causes you, say, nervousness or anxiety. So meditation in that manner is a matter of taking your mind off of what you don't want, which is an object, a notion, an idea of anxiety, and putting your mind on an object which you do want, that is more pleasant. And in the case of meditating on a color, the attention would be placed on the color. If you develop strength and concentration, then you are not thinking about the anxiety. So it's a matter of taking your attention off of what you don't want and placing it on what you do want. That's helpful, but far more beneficial is the ultimate abiding in the pure awareness of the being that we all are, which is pure awareness, pure existence, pure intelligence. The very source in which the mind itself takes rise. And that's why we practice self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is, instead of an I meditating on something other, it's the I being withdrawn intentionally into the pure awareness out of which the I rises. So it is immediate and direct, whereas meditation is occurring in the mind and requires the mind in order to practice the meditation. In other words, the mind has to stay active, externalizing on the notion or idea on which you are meditating. Whereas inquiry, you are withdrawing the mind into the pure being of which the mind itself is appearing. In order for there to be a feeling such as nervousness or anxious, there has to be an I there feeling it, feeling anxious or nervous. If there is no I there feeling that, if you're back in the awareness that you really are, behind the I, free of the I, and not at the effect of I, then there can be no nervousness, because it requires the I to be nervous. So right now, let's practice. Closing the eyes and taking a few deep breaths. Abide in the awareness that we are prior to thought. Look for yourself to see to what extent you may be habitually identified with your mind and your body, and therefore caught in the addiction to thinking. Look and see for yourself without any judgment. Don't be critical of yourself, but be honest. Be honest with yourself in looking and seeing for yourself if there may be an addiction to thinking, and see to what extent you are able to abide in simple awareness, remaining in the simple awareness without thought. Now, in telling yourself the truth, and by observing and seeing, was there much thinking going on if you were choosing not to think? If you were choosing to be still, to be silent, and to not think? Making that choice for yourself. Look and see to what extent you are able to keep that choice and remain still and quiet in this sense of just being, in which you're not being this or not being that. You're not thinking this or thinking that. You're just choosing to be quiet, choosing to be still and free of thoughts of any nature. And the next part of it is to see that, in all probability, you are not able to stay very long in this stillness or silence without it being disturbed to some extent by thoughts. So acknowledge that the thoughts are going to happen and do happen on their own, even when you are choosing for them not to occur. The next thing is to let them happen. Don't resist them, but also do not identify with them. Stay in the stillness, stay in the silence as far as your attention is concerned, to the best of your ability, without identifying with the thoughts, without following the thoughts, or without going off with the thoughts wherever the thoughts are leading your attention. But instead of following the thoughts, return your attention to the pure awareness and stillness and silence of your being. This is a very beneficial exercise. This is the simplicity of inquiry. Another phase or way of practicing the inquiry, which is nothing more than returning your attention to awareness itself. Each time you are aware that your attention is swaying and moving off and away from the central point of awareness, your own being. In the spiritual practice, if you are engaged in it in this moment, and in what has just been described, this is the spiritual practice. This is the most effective spiritual practice there is, to ultimately abide in the pure consciousness of being, the very self that we all are. The realization which is awareness, pure being, the very self that we are, is prior to time and space. It is beyond time and space. It is free of time and space. This pure awareness that we all are was not born, and consequently it will not die. The body and mind are born, and the body and mind will die. But this spiritual practice is the process of freeing oneself from this identification with the body and the mind. When we reach the point where we are totally free from the identification with the body and the mind, and are able to remain or abide in this pure awareness of the self which we are, this is the transcendental awareness of the self. The very word transcendental actually means ending identification with the trance of living as a body-mind entity. Quote 753. The ego sense is unreal, though it appears to be real. The ego sense is unreal, though it appears to be real. Quote 754. On examination, even the body, etc., are seen to be unreal and false. When even the mind has ceased with the cessation of notions concerning the body and the world, the self or the infinite consciousness alone remains. On examination, even the body, etc., are seen to be unreal and false. When even the mind has ceased with the cessation of notions concerning the body and the world, the self or the infinite consciousness alone remains. Quote 755. Matter and mind are identical, and both are false. You are deluded by this false appearance. Self-knowledge will dispel this illusion. Both self-knowledge and the cessation of world appearance are the characteristics of wisdom. Matter and mind are identical, and both are false. You are deluded by this false appearance. Self-knowledge will dispel this delusion. Both self-knowledge and the cessation of world appearance are the characteristics of wisdom. Quote 756. In the infinite and unmodified or unconditioned consciousness, modification is impossible. The conditioning is but a false notion. Therefore it melts away in the heart of one who has self-knowledge and who is free from delusion and ego sense. In the infinite and unmodified or unconditioned consciousness, modification is impossible. The conditioning is but a false notion. Therefore it melts away in the heart of one who has self-knowledge and who is free from delusion and ego sense.